Thanks everyone for joining. What we really want to show off today is the Collate platform and really thinking about the unified use case here. On these monthly demos that we'll have, we'll, explore new product features. So it's a great way to stay up to date with all things Collate, but it's also a great way to kind of get refreshers on new use cases. Maybe you're only thinking about Collate from a data discovery and data governance point of view. We might have sessions more geared towards, data quality. But today's session being, our inaugural one, we'll definitely think about how we can talk briefly on each aspect of Collate and how this really, I like to kind of go is thinking, what do we want to achieve? So we all hopefully want to use data. We all want to make valuable decisions off data, and we want to get value out of data. So in today's walkthrough and demonstration, we'll talk about the steps needed to do exactly that. Sadly, it's not let me just sit down at my computer and start using data. It's not that easy, but we're going to show how Collate can essentially make it that easy. And what I like to kind of refer to this little journey as is the future. And the future, what that stands for is the ability to find, understand, trust, use, and reuse your data. So before you can use your data, what do you need to do? You need to find it. You need to discover it. You need to know where it lives. Once you found it, it's not enough. You can have 101 different customer tables. Which one is the right one? Which one is the right one for my use case, for my domain, for my specific needs? What do these columns represent? And starting to, really understand that. But understanding a table, understanding a data object is only one half the battle. The other thing is trust. Is the quality up to par? Are there any, things I should know about from a policy and governance lens? So really being able to trust your data is another area that Collate enables. And then we want to talk about usability and reusability. That's where we can look at things like Lineage and ER diagrams and queries to really supersell your data initiatives. So with that future, let's kind of start going on that journey together, starting with find. How do we find data? So right now we are looking at the Collate landing page where we can see we have a number of data assets, everything from, Snowflake and Databricks to things like Postgres and MySQL. We have pipeline tools like Fivetran and Airflow, dashboards like Tableau and Power BI, and a whole lot more. Collate offers over 90 connectors at this point and coming out with more and more at every single release. So really being able to bring everything into one place. So thinking about how we can find, starting on the homepage is a great spot where I can click into any of these data sources that I might be interested in and see what objects, what assets are living beneath. This homepage, we can also see some nice little navigational features like following or recent views or our knowledge center, allowing you to pick up right where you left off. The homepage is customizable by persona. So in this case, I'm a data steward. So I have some things for KPIs and total data assets, just really allowing me to understand what's there. But if I was a business steward, I might want to switch into that business user role. And then I wouldn't necessarily see those areas, or some of my navigational elements on the side may change based off their ranking order. So really thinking about how we can customize this user experience based off who's using it. And then we can also think about it from a domain standpoint. Maybe I only care about things within the customer domain. I can set that to see now only a couple objects in Databricks and Redshift. So really being able to discover what's out there, but also think about the persona in mind and what they may be interested in seeing. So obviously you can click into any of these data assets to find, what you're looking for, but maybe you want to search for something specific. Maybe I want to search for customer information. I can hit customer and now I can see I have a variety of things like glossary terms and tables and stored procedures and database schemas and dashboards and data products, all that kind of fall under this purview of customer. I have over 10 pages worth of results. So I can do one of two things. I can go through all 16 of those pages looking for the right customer table, or maybe I know some of the characteristics that the customer table has. Maybe I know it has PII sensitive information. Or maybe I know what I'm looking for is tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 4. Maybe I know it's in Redshift. Maybe I know it's in this Redshift prod, for instance. I can start narrowing down my scope, my focus based off these different filters I have at top. And I can also sort by things like popularity or relevance or usage. Collate also allows you to have the ability to customize your search rankings so you can boost or penalize different things. Maybe something that's tier one should always appear before tier two and have a higher score. Different elements like that will really allow you to control and enable that greater discovery, spending less time using the wrong data and more time actually getting value out of the data. The other thing with search that I will show off and just kind of clearing, we also have our natural language search. And this natural language search will allow us to just type up expressions like this. I'm going to use tier two actually, where I'm looking for tables with tier two classification with customer information. Notice before when I searched for a customer, I saw not just tables, but schemas and glossary terms and dashboards. I saw all the tier information. I had to filter based off of the top. With Collate's natural language search, you can enter that natural expression with the right criteria and see exactly what you're looking for. It's only showing me 2 tables. It's not showing me 200 tables. It's only showing me tables with tier 2, and they both have customer information. So really being able to understand exactly the object I was looking for, again, in a natural, more native tone than having to know exactly what filters and what areas to use at the top. And then in our search results, the last element of that find principle, we can also see we have some information on this customer table. We can see the name, we can see the certification, we can see the domains or owners, we can see the tiering information as well as the usage information. And then if we turn our attention to the right, we also get a little preview of that table by looking at the type and the domain, any data quality. So it looks like we have some things happening there, different tags and glossary terms associated to it, its description, data products, and the overall schema. So really thinking about how we can understand a little bit about this table before we actually take that dive in. So let's take that dive in. We can go into this customer table and really start to understand and hopefully trust it. Something that jump out at us at first is we see the name, we see breadcrumbs of where this table lives. We have the ability to follow it, like it, or upvote or downvote it. And then we can also see some version history as well to see how this table is changing over time. So maybe I wanted to know who's making what change. Is it automations? Is it myself? Is it another steward? We're able to track that through our version history. And then if we go back to this table, we can also see that we have some data quality incidences, again, helping that trust boil up to the surface a little bit better. Now, there's a lot of metadata here. We have our tierings and we have our classifications. We have some descriptions as well. A couple ways we can get these things there to really create that context for people. We can edit this description. So I can edit here and add the description, or I can request somebody to update. Maybe I want our good friends, Collate, Kate, and Sally, the steward, to provide a description. We can suggest and request them to do so. And then the more exciting thing is we actually have the ability for AI to document some of these objects. So here we have some suggested description from a tiering point of view, as well as an AI documentation point of view, so descriptions. If I click on this, it's going to suggest what that description should be. So before number of orders was blank, now I see what the number of orders should potentially be, and how the value is derived. And the thing that is really cool about how we gathered these descriptions is we're not just looking at the name of the column, but we're actually looking at the type and how it's used in queries, the context of the table, and other elements like that. Some really cool examples that I've seen with the Collate AI descriptions is if something's a Boolean type, it's actually going to call out in the description that it's an either or, that is a flag. So you know what type of value to expect in there without having to look at sample data or anything like that. The other one that I've seen is we actually are able to look at the specific context of the table. So we have some customers in the oil and gas field or industry, and they have a barometric index, a BMI. Databricks would classify BMI as the bodily mass index, but we're able to actually look at the full context, know that they're oil and gas, and suggest that BMI actually is their barometric index measure. And being able to do those associations allows us to have better descriptions. I can choose to accept all of these, Also, from the configuration, I can have a setting where if a description is blank, automatically suggest a description and fill it. Don't, wait for someone to come in there and approve. So really making it powerful in that point of view to really get things going. The other thing that we have is our tier. So our tier here, I thought it was tier 2, but if we ask our Collate AI, it suggests that it's a tier 1 table instead. And I can choose to accept this, I can choose to reject this, or I could just close this. That tiering information is looking at your query usage and your lineage. So if you have 2 tables, one table that has 1 query and no downstream dependencies, and another table that has 100 queries written against it and lots of lineage and downstream dependencies, which one's more critical? Well, it's the one that has more usage. So because we're able to capture usage, because we're able to capture lineage, we're actually able to suggest what the tiering should be for a given object. And the nice thing about our tags, although it says tier 2, if I just float over, I can actually see what it implies to be tier 1 or to be tier 2. With things like sensitivity, I actually get the policy on what it means to be PII sensitive. So we're not just slapping a label on something and calling it sensitive, we're actually able to provide the proper guidance on what sensitivity means. Within your organization, you might have hundreds of different types of conflicting definition. Collate allowed you to create that standardization across the board using our tags and acting as policy. So I could even click into the sensitivity tag and be able to see what it means and what assets fall under the sensitive purview policy. So we're just really empowering you guys to have a better understanding of what these objects means. And with our tags, just like our tiers and our descriptions, we also leverage Collate AI to auto-suggest what those tags are. So we look at the column name, but we also look at the formation of the data, and we're able to then suggest, is this sensitive? Is this not? Is this an IP address? Is this a date? And different elements like that by looking at the format. So the example I like to use for sensitive, if we see 3 digits dash 4 digits dash 3 digits dash 2 digits dash 4 digits, we're automatically able to say, hey, this kind of looks like a social security number. Let's tag this as sensitive. Although the column just says ID or identification number or something like that, we're able to grab that context, look at the format, and auto apply a specific tag. Again, allowing you guys to work more efficiently and get broader coverage and broader governance within your organization. The next feature I kind of want to show, moving away from this customer table, is another way we can get descriptions and automation tags and different attributes around your data in an automated fashion. So Collate provides the ability to create automations. So I'm going to look at this one. I'm going to just create one for email. And I'm going to look at my tables. So I have 730 tables. And then I want to look at where the column is email. So I have a couple, and I'm going to use this one. So it looks like 27 assets meet this criteria. Now let's take some actions. I can add a custom property or a description, or maybe I want to add a tag or glossary term. I can say, oh, I know email is sensitive. Email is sensitive and it's an email. Let me add this tag to those 27 assets that meet this criteria. And this can easily be 270 assets that meet this criteria or 2,700. What really happens here is we're creating a programmatic rule to apply our tags or other actions. It doesn't have to be tags. It could even be things like data quality or lineage propagation, where we're actually moving things from upstream to downstream. And we're saying, hey, based off these criteria, let's perform this action on this given schedule or on an ad hoc basis. So as you ingest more metadata, we can actually be a little bit more dynamic on making sure your tags, your data quality tests, your lineage is all propagating effectively. And then going back to our customer table. So that's how we can get some of these tags in here. We can also use that to get glossary terms, where we can look at this glossary term for customer lifetime value and really start to see how this is captured. Glossaries can have synonyms or related terms. They can even be associated to assets like I've done here. And with these glossaries, we're able to have these different collections of domain-oriented context. And then we also have, in a similar vein, the ability to link to data products or different types of glossary terms, or different types of knowledge articles like this privacy policy that we see here. Now, kind of moving away, hopefully we understand this customer table. There's a lot that we threw at you guys: tags, descriptions, data products, glossary terms, knowledge center pieces. We're starting to understand this table, but can we trust it? Well, hopefully the answer is less. We can see that we have some pretty straightforward things like first name and last name. However, that's not always the case. When I look at the sample data, I see we're actually looking at a different story here. I only have a first letter of my last name. So if I was looking for all customers whose last name is Smith, I would probably not come up with anything because we just have that first letter associated. So sample data really allows you to start trusting your data, but we can also look into it from a data observability lens to also see what's going on. So here I can get my high level overview. I can see things from a column or table profile where I can say, oh, look at this customer last name. We only have a uniqueness of 2%. Let's see what's actually going on here. Let's investigate and really understand what's going on. We can even drill down into these things like customer lifetime value and see how it's fluctuating or changing over time. It looks like we even have some data distribution where we can identify some outliers and elements like that. Then jumping into the data quality, we can see what data quality tests are run. We can also create a test. So maybe I want a volume test. So I'm going to look at the volume of this table. We have some out-of-the-box tests like column counts, custom queries, data freshness, comparing two tables for differences, and then looking at the row count. So that's the volume one I want. So we can say, oh, this looks like it's between 100 and 105. When this hits 106, this test is going to fail. Now, what's the problem here? Well, you have to manually increase this threshold or manually decrease this threshold based off the data. Colate allows for this dynamic assertion feature where you can turn this on. And what we're going to do is profile your data and then automatically suggest what data quality threshold should be set in order for you to have better and more control and spend less time arbitrarily setting a threshold and more time looking at data quality results, which ultimately manifest their way here. So I can look at this data diff test where I'm looking at my customer table. I'm comparing it to my staging table. I'm using my first, last, and most recent orders based off the key column of customer ID. And it looks like there was one column here that failed. So then I would be able to take a look. I could assign an incident if I wanted to, and I can look at my specific user. Let's pick on our good friend Kia here and ask him to open up an incident on why we have this discrepancy. See what issue is here and get some sample data. Then I could comment that, and then Kia can look to see what's happening here. We can assign it a different severity and get an overview of what's happening with this specific test case that we have in mind. So really powerful, being able to manage your data quality. We can also look at data quality from a whole platform point of view. So I have 737 tables. Only 78 have data quality. Of those 78, 74 are healthy. And this is our success and fails. We can see the different dimensions and we can see what open incidences and what our response times ultimately look like throughout the platform, and being able to filter on, maybe I only care about tier 2. Let's take a look at what data quality looks like there, or tier 1, or different elements like that. And then the last thing we want to cover in today's quick demo before we open it up to questions is Lineage. So we want to see how data is moving from maybe our raw tables, or maybe we want to look at where it's coming from in an on-prem solution and then going to Redshift to then land in our customer table and populate our data models and dashboards. So being able to see what's happening throughout the system here. And from this cross source, we're able to even bring in different pipelines like this Postgres to Redshift. We can also look at things like column level lineage and see, oh, look, we have ID becomes customer ID. Let's actually take a look and see how that's happening. I can actually click on the edge, and usually I'm able to see, but it looks like this might be a poor example, so we'll follow up there. But I'm actually able to see how this customer ID flows into different objects and being able to trace things like first name and see where it derived and derivated from. And then we can also build on different layers, not just column, but also things like observability and say, oh, we had 4 data quality issues. It looks like these things downstream are also going to be impacted based off of what we see here. So again, this was a high level walkthrough in less than 30 minutes of the Collate platform. There's a whole lot more like domains, like metrics, like our insight center and global lineage. So really exciting stuff. I hope you guys turn into next time. And now I want to open it up to questions for the next 5 or so minutes. I can stay on longer if needed. So, welcome to answer any questions. And it looks like we have our first one in the chat from Murat. His question was, filtering the incidences per domain would be helpful. Each domain may have different data quality KPIs. So I think what Murat's referring to here is being able to have an additional filter based off of domain where I can say, okay, let's look at the customer data quality, or let's look at product data quality and elements like that. I absolutely agree, Murat. I think that can definitely be something we add as a feature enhancement. I think we can kind of get there a little bit based off of the owner, but that's still not quite what you're intending, but we'll definitely take that feedback back to our product team and see what we can do there. So thank you. Do you have any plans for column propagation in column level lineage? Flat tables may have columns, make the UI very difficult to use. Pagination, thank you. Sorry. I will follow up with that question as well. Johnson, if you can actually take that from the chat so we can follow up with Murat on that one. I do not know, but I think that would be a powerful use case as well. When we look at our automation for lineage propagation, just going to edit this. We have these different types of actions. Right now, what Murat's basically saying is for a test case to also move downstream would be helpful. Definitely see the value in that, and we'll see what our product team thinks on a feasibility standpoint. One thing I showed very briefly is we do actually have the ability to create, let me actually select the data source or table. We actually have the ability to use our automations for test cases. Not exactly what Murat was referring to with the pagination, but this would at least allow you to do 100 tables in one fail, swipe. Does the AI sensitive tagging use data for classification or only metadata? It depends is the answer. We can configure that to be on a per case basis. So if I go into a specific data service, and this is actually a cool thing to show first, at our data service level, we're actually able to capture things like description coverage and PII coverage, as well as tier and ownership. And we can actually see what AI is doing versus total and seeing how those distributions. But to go to Murat's question on, are we looking at data? We can configure it not to look at data. By default, it won't. But if you set the store sample data to true and the enable classification turned on, this will then look at the data for the auto tagging. So it's not going to necessarily be reading just the context, but it's also going to be looking at the structure and format. Right, not to sideline your questions, but Brittany, Brian, Joao, or Juan, any questions from you guys? Feel free to either raise your hand and we can take you off mute or throw them in the chat like Murat. Murat, feel free to keep firing away at those questions and we can always follow up via email. Yeah. Hey, Murat.
Hey, Joe. So to come back to my question about pagination. So what I meant was, when I open the Lineage UI, let's say that I have a table with 100 columns, right? So if I open the Lineage view with columns enabled, that looks really ugly. Like I cannot really use it anymore, if it makes sense. So when
like
we have, for example, if you expand the customer's tableau here, like if you have many columns, it becomes really big. And I was wondering, if there's a way to improve the UI user experience here.
Gotcha. Yeah, we'll follow up with our team on that one specifically. I thought you meant the loading, so apologies there. I have seen cases where, yes, you are just bombarded with thousands of columns and then the UI takes forever. I purposely picked this nice and clean example for today's demo, but I have seen what you're saying. I know we are working on ways where we can control kind of the nodes that are being loaded, but not sure specifically on that column level column aspect. Maybe something we can do is like cap it at 5 and allow you to show more and then leverage the search. I think that's how we approach it today, where if I do the show more, I can see all of that list, but we are capping it. And if you wanted to see only number, we can only show that. So maybe it's giving you a setting to only load X amount and then being able to search for whatever. So again, we can take a look and it kind of show that off. We are improving Lineage a lot, and it's definitely a priority here at Collate. And we have some ways you can filter, but again, to your point, being able to cap the amount that loads to make it easier to understand. Other questions, comments, feedback even about my demo or the product itself? Anything anyone thought was really cool or not so cool, or you wish you did see? Yep, we do have the ability to demonstrate. I don't have any examples in this instance, but we can show where there are upstream failures for Lineage and be able to notify that, oh, there's been an issue upstream. Let me look here and notify and send out alerts and things based off that. Alrighty. If Brittany, Juan, or Murat doesn't have any last questions, we can give some time back again. Oh, Juan, thank you. In which versions are the AI features available, or is this something that we should enable? So the AI features are a Collate add-on. They don't come baked into the product. I believe any version after 1.6 has some AI features. My instance here is 1.7, but for the AI features, it is a Collate add-on. If you are a Collate customer, I encourage you to reach out to your account team and they can provide guidance on what that package looks like. I'll have Nick reach out to you on if that's something you're interested in. Have a great weekend and hope you guys attend to the next one. Alrighty. Bye-bye.